What is going on, guys? How are you? Welcome back to the channel and to another video. Today we'll be taking a look at something that I really don't get on the channel very often, and mainly because I'm not into vintage watches. That's a very kind of wide scope when I think about it, but unfortunately this reason keeps me away from this style of watch that we're going to feature today altogether. And this is a bit of a shame because I'm finding out more and more that I'm kind of missing out because I'm not actually looking at more watches of this style. One of my main reasons is the fact that vintage watches are most of the time old. And again, I'm generalizing here. They require a lot of maintenance and careful, sometimes expensive repairs. And you need to have most of the times a designated watch guy that you always go to, and these sort of people are very rare nowadays. But what if we have a watch that has the vintage look but with modern materials? Enter Presidis, a company that does just that. They build vintage military watches with modern materials and try to keep the authenticity as close as possible as the original. When I say close, I mean really close, because this is almost an identical reissue. To be completely honest, I've heard about A11 watches before, but I've never really knew what they stood for. These were watches that had a certain set of requirements and were worn by soldiers in World War II. And the awesome thing is that Presidis have faithfully reproduced these in pretty much every way. I mean, they do a more period accurate 32mm version of this to keep it true to the original design. Today we're checking out the A11 Type 44, and more specifically the 38mm version. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have much experience with this sort of watches like I was saying, but more recently I've been checking out field watches and similar, hence this is how I got into this. Before diving in, I would really love for you guys to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews, as this really motivates me to make more videos, and I actually do enjoy what I do. Now, let's address the burning question here. How much does this cost and what do you get for your money? Well, to start, the price is just a little over $545 for the watch on the canvas strap, and $595 if you include a Bonkley bracelet. And yes, I do believe that this is worth the money. And before you say, well, George, this costs too much for a reissue and the brand doesn't have any heritage, I hear you, but look at it this way. For the same money, Locko will sell you a watch with a non-hacking Japanese movement that actually costs $30. So what does Heritage give you? Just a name in this case, but you are wearing a brand. What do you get for your money here? Now, you get an almost one-to-one reissue of the original that is assembled in the US. Now, that on its own brings additional cost. You get a dog tag with the barcode for the 2-year warranty. I think that's kind of cool. Most brands give you 1 year. And you also get a Swiss manual wind movement. Believe me, this is a lot. It may be a simplistic design, but I think overall as a package, you get a lot. Now, to make sense of this video, as I'm going through, I will try and make some analogies that some of you may or may not relate, but that's why the comment section is down below. And also, I think that this is the best way for me to show you the value in this watch. So let's start with the dimensions. The variant that we have here has a case diameter of 38mm, a lug width of 20mm, a lug to lug of 45, and a thickness of 13, including the dome acrylic crystal. Right, you can also get this with a 32mm case, which I believe stays true to the original from the era, like I was saying. From my perspective of a fan of the style, but not really into vintage watches, I like having the option, and I do think that true enthusiasts will appreciate this. And also on the other side of the spectrum, you have people that like the style, but not the original size. So that's why I like having the option. The 38mm wears almost perfect on my wrist, especially with the Bonkley bracelet, which we will cover later. At least in my eyes, this is the size that I prefer the most. And considering it's 13mm with that acrylic crystal, it doesn't actually feel that tall. Let us move on to the case. So we have 316L stainless steel. It's polished finish pretty much everywhere. My sample has seen better days, I have to say. We also have a coin edge bezel, which is not actually fully coin edge because the pattern runs only halfway through the surface. The same pattern can be found on the case back, which is kind of nice and kind of breaks what would normally be a very simple and bland design otherwise, and it also adds to the visuals. We also have drilled lugs, and the end links are straight. We have some lines that kind of mimic the round end links, which is something that I haven't seen in my research of a vintage A11 watch. But then again, precedents do state that they do stay true to the original, and in this case, I just have to say maybe that I haven't researched enough to find the one that has a similar design. Now we have a push-pull crown at the 3. Now this is unsigned, and you guessed it, yes, it does stay true to the vintage design. I should also mention that an unexpected and very welcome feature to this is a stated water resistance of 100 meters. Now, personally, I really like this, and this is one of the reasons why I love modern releases of vintage models. You wouldn't see this on vintage watches unless you start replacing rubber gaskets and test it, and that's just something that I wouldn't be prepared to do, and that's why this makes much more sense to me. And speaking of sense, I want to talk about the dial, and more specifically I want to start with the acrylic crystal covering it. Now, it's plenty of AR coating, and for some reason that just works with the actual color of the dial. Another modern feature that older watches don't have, at least I didn't know they do, and in this case I do see the value, is the added layers of AR coating. Now, on a more contradictory note, I do prefer the acrylic crystal in this case over sapphire, as much as I rave about modern features, because acrylic is used in a lot of modern watches, and also, well, in the newer watches, and also you can buff out scratches with a bit of polywatch. So this is a much better option than mineral, let's say, because on a mineral, if you do manage to get a scratch, which you will, now that is not coming off. In the grand scheme of things, this whole crystal debacle wouldn't be a big deal, but I do feel that this is worth mentioning. The dial itself is actually what you expect. Almost a one-to-one copy of the original ones, super simple and legible. No branding or anything, but one thing that does actually stand out to me is the fact that printing on the dial is super crisp. You can also get this with white printing, but I do prefer this faux patina, as I find that this just works better with the overall feel of the Era. And speaking of the Era, the Lume has the same shade, and well, speaking of faux patina, the Lume has the same shade, which generally isn't as strong from my experience as regular C3 or BGW9. This does a pretty decent job for itself, and the application is again quite crisp. If you put this under the macro lens, that actually really is noticeable. I mean, if you actually look at it this way, if this had bright shining lume, the overall feel that it was supposed to shine through wouldn't be the same. I'll get my coat. Something that pays tribute to the old days is the movement. Powering this is a Swiss-made manual wind Soprod P024. Now, I haven't had that many watches with this movement, but according to the internet, this is an ETA 2824 based movement. And since the version we have here is manual wind, I'm guessing they removed the rotor. I'm not able to tell you 100% because I just am not familiar with it. There are some benefits to this and some era respecting features. Now, first of all, it has a thin profile because you don't have that rotor taking space. And second, the original watches were manual wind, so you kind of need to respect that, okay? If we look at the technical sheet, we still have the same high beats per hour as the ETA, but in this case, I'm not sure about the stated tolerances because I just, again, couldn't find it. This one is running at plus 10 seconds per day. I mean, it would still be within the stated tolerances of the ETA, but you would expect that to be a bit lower. To say it like it is here, I mean, unless my watch, in my opinion, is running plus or minus 3 minutes a day, I think I could live with 10 seconds. And whoever says different should really sell their entire collection and pick up fishing, because watch collecting is not for them. Now, let's move on to the final part of the review. The bracelet and the strap. Before I even start, I do want to say that the 20mm bonklet bracelet that I have on this really elevates the watch. I mean, first of all, It's worth the extra $50 in my opinion. I love the comfort, the look and the feel on the wrist. Also, I was expecting it to be a bit more jangly given the way it looks, but it's very well made and nothing rattles and it just does not look cheap at all. I also love the fact that you can adjust the length as you go along and in case your wrist expands without any additional mods. And it's quick release and you can also use it on other watches. Like I was saying, you can also get this with a brown leather strap and a bone strap, but I've only handled the green canvas strap that came with this particular one that I have here. It's decent, it's soft out of the box, it suits the style. Now, two things that I want to add here is the fact there is no branding on the interior of the strap or the company name, which again, it's not necessarily a bad comment, and given the fact that they are very strict and staying close to the original as much as possible, this is a good thing, but I would have liked to see a bit more identity. And number two, the strap is very, very long, which again, this is not a bad comment, but something to be mindful if you have small wrists like me. You might look at swapping it, but if you have a 7-inch plus wrist, you're absolutely flying. So just to wrap this all up, what are my final conclusions? I think this is a watch for enthusiasts of the era, in my opinion, for people that appreciate the style and know what they're buying. You don't just get this to have a military watch in your collection. You get this because you have 3 other watches from the era and this takes it to the next level. It does just that. Perfect representation of the A11 from my experience with modern materials. And the bracelet, I mean, that just makes the watch 10 times better. That made it for me anyway, so much cooler. Overall, having this around made me appreciate and realize why people like these watches so much. And it's not just the watch in this case. I think this particular one, being tied to whatever is tied, is a piece of history. I'll leave a link down below to the website if you guys want to check it out. Now, that was it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed my review of the Type 44, the Precis Type 44. Do let me know in the comment section down below what you think about the watches, if you have any experience with the company, with this style of watch. And I really do appreciate you sticking around. Thank you very much. Click a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't so. It really helps me out if I didn't say it enough in this video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.